Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, November 29th, 2017. I am Dave Biddle. I'm very happy to be joined by the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. Bax, of course, the latest college football playoff rankings came out last night. Buckeyes sitting there, number 8, move up only one spot. If they beat Wisconsin, and let's say they beat them they cover the spread, but they don't blow them out. They beat them by 10. And I know a lot of other things can happen, but just generally speaking, what's your gut feeling here? Do you think the Buckeyes get in with like a 10-point win over Wisconsin?
I don't know if a 10-point win would be enough. I think you're talking maybe you beat them by 3 touchdowns and it looks decisive, or let's say JT doesn't play and Dwayne Haskins comes in and has just like a monster game, and everybody goes, wow, is that the standard that we're looking at now going forward? I could totally see that being enough to sway them. Right now, it's interesting to see how this stands, because you can't expect OSU to really move up this week, more so than they really kind of sat static with all the teams sort of still in front of them. I mean, let's face it, Alabama still has less losses than OSU. OSU hasn't beaten Wisconsin yet, so you can't really say you expect them to jump them already. But I think OSU has to go out and has to not just win by a field goal, probably has to win by a couple touchdowns to give the committee enough thought to think this really is one of the 4 best teams in the country. But, you know, this has been a big debate for the last couple of days, and to be real frank about the whole situation, neither one of these teams can complain if they don't get in. Alabama played a weak schedule. Their best win is LSU, which you tell me LSU or Michigan's a better win. It's kind of a toss-up. OSU's 4th best win might be as good as Alabama's best win. But Alabama didn't go out and lose by 31 points to Iowa. So there's a little bit of an issue there for OSU. So you have to think, is the committee going to say 3 top 15 wins for Ohio State, 0 top 15 wins for Alabama? Does that carry more weight than 2 losses for Ohio State versus 1 for Alabama? Neither one of these teams can really gripe if they don't get in. So I think the one thing that's up OSU's sleeve is if the SEC gets a team in, do they really want to be the first time to put 2 teams from one league in, especially in a year in the SEC where there were 3 good teams? The rest of the conference was mediocre at best. You know, this isn't the SEC of 2009, so that's going in Ohio State's favor right now. But right now it's a coin flip at best, and the Buckeyes better show well on Saturday if they want to have a shot.
Let's talk about the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State favored by 6.5 points over Wisconsin. Wisconsin's, especially their defensive stats, are just off the charts good. Even their offenses, they're number 42 in the country in total offense, but they're number 1 in the country in total defense, obviously because their schedule being soft plays a lot into that. But the thing is about Wisconsin, though, I mean, yes, they wouldn't be number 1 in the country if they played a tougher schedule. We all know that. But they still have a legitimately good, very good defense. They have a big physical offensive line with guys that are going to play in the NFL. They have a really good running back. Sometimes looking at the eye test backs, I feel like they do not pass the eye test. Sometimes watching the Badgers, I feel like they do pass the eye test. Just what do you make of this matchup with the Badgers on Saturday?
I think Wisconsin's a legitimate top 10 team. Do I think they're a playoff team? I don't know if they're going to be a repeat of Michigan State in the playoffs a couple of years ago, but I'm not super confident in them. That's for sure. I think the big question for them is going to be which version of Alex Warnibrook do we get? The one who's an accurate passer with play action, or the one who can't seem to hit open guys? Ohio State's in trouble if he can find Troy Fumagalli wide open. If Jerome Baker gets spun around in circles a few more times in coverage, that's going to kill OSU. Stylistically speaking, this is a tough matchup for OSU because what does Wisconsin like to do? They like to run the football and throw to the tight end, right? So OSU can sell out and stop the run, no problem, but they haven't been able to defend the tight end the second half of the year, really the whole year. And that's going to be your linebackers in space. And that's a big thing for OSU is that this is a good Wisconsin team. They did to Michigan 2 weeks ago what Ohio State essentially did to Michigan last week. Wore them down with superior talent, a pounding running game that Michigan couldn't handle, and essentially shut down the offense for the Wolverines. So OSU might have been slightly more impressive, but, I mean, really, Wisconsin didn't have the kind of horror first quarter that OSU did before the 31-6 run. This is a good Badgers team. There's no question about it. If OSU goes out and beats them by 3 touchdowns, I'll be very impressed, but I certainly don't think that's going to happen. Right now, I don't know for sure whether OSU is even going to win this game. because Wisconsin can take advantage of their deficiencies in pass defense, particularly with the linebackers. The name Fumagalli is going to be a cuss word for OSU fans if they lose this game. That simple.
Back to the CFP for a second. If just talking about what it will take for Ohio State to get in. If they're able to beat Wisconsin, even if they just beat them by 7 points, let's say, let's take Alabama out of it for a second, because in that scenario, I agree Alabama would get in over Ohio State if they squeak by Wisconsin. But let's say Ohio State beats Wisconsin by a field goal or a touchdown, but TCU beats Oklahoma. I think that takes the Big 12 out of it. Ohio State would get in. TCU would be left out. Oklahoma would be left out. I get the head-to-head thing. I just feel like the Buckeyes would get in. Do you concur with that? Just your thoughts on that scenario if TCU is able to beat Oklahoma?
Oh, I think the committee in that situation will look at it and say, we don't even want to try to deal with this. Take them both out. Really, the bigger question, I think, at that point is that, sure, Oklahoma beat Ohio State head-to-head 3 months ago, but they didn't win their conference championship and had the same number of losses. So you can make the argument to me that it'd be hard to include them at that point. I think if you're OSU, you probably do root for TCU because I certainly don't think TCU goes over Ohio State at the end of the day.
Exactly.
And that kind of, I agree with you, eliminates the Big 12, if you will. And then you set up, do you have a rematch of the Iron Bowl in the playoffs and have OSU play Clemson or whatever? That could be really interesting. So if you're an OSU fan, you root for Stanford to beat USC, you root for TCU to beat Oklahoma. You don't really care who wins Auburn versus Georgia, though. I suppose Georgia winning does make it a little easier to just throw Auburn right out. But, if Auburn gets in and knocks off Georgia, you have a lot of trouble putting Alabama in when Alabama's already lost the last game of their season to Auburn in the Iron Bowl. That could be really interesting sort of to justify your matchups. But I do think if TCU wins, that's a good thing for Ohio State because that does knock Oklahoma out. I don't know how many times in history you're going to see a team like Oklahoma back in 2003 lose their conference championship game and still get a shot.
Ohio State's being very coy about J.T. Barrett's status backs. Urban said he's probable, but, talking to Kevin Wilson last night and some of the players, they're being very coy, and one thing they are admitting is Dwayne Haskins is getting a lot of first-team reps. Read between the lines. Give me your gut feeling here. How much of Dwayne Haskins do you think we're going to see on Saturday? Could he even start?
Here's the thing. I think everybody's being coy about it because they want Wisconsin to have to prepare for two different styles of offense. That's the smart thing to do because, as we all know, when Haskins comes in, the passing game is a completely different threat. I think what you're going to see is that JT is going to start, and it gives Urban the out, if you will. Like, let's say they go out there and they struggle the first two drives. JT has 6 carries for 12 yards, and Buckeyes go 3 and out, right? That's essentially what, a lot of us think is a worst-case scenario, but it wouldn't be shocked if it happened. Well, at that point, Urban can go to Haskins and say, well, JT wasn't healthy, and we just felt like we couldn't do anything that JT could do, and he's still our guy, right? But essentially you're benching him, but you're blaming injury for it. And then you bring in Haskins, and the offense starts moving the way it did against Michigan, and the way, honestly, I said it earlier this year, and I got crapped on for it, and then JT played the game of his life at Penn State, and everybody kind of quieted down about it. But the offense is better with Haskins in because Urban has to give the ball to his tailbacks because defenses have to defend against the best tailback tandem in the country, which is what Weber and Dobbins essentially have become the last couple weeks. And the passing game gets open so much wider. It's amazing how much more open those receivers looked when Haskins was throwing the ball to them, right? So this gives Urban the out. If his offense doesn't move well with JT, to say JT was hurt, and we had to bring in Haskins. So, and that's kind of what I think they're being coy as well, not just to make Wisconsin prepare, but to give himself that option. If things aren't moving well and he needs to get the pedal to the metal with the offense, then you can bring in Haskins and not affect the dynamics and politics inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center of bringing in J.T. Barrett to the bench and putting Dwayne Haskins in the game.
Last topic. What do you think will happen with Greg Schiano after this season? Do you think Ohio State will be able to hang on to him as defensive coordinator? Do you think another program like, let's just throw one out there, Arkansas, or if, Dave Doran takes the, Tennessee job, maybe, Schiano goes to NC State. Do you think Schiano's going to take a head coaching job this offseason? Do you think the Buckeyes are going to be fortunate enough to hold on to Schiano for one more year as defensive coordinator because of Tennessee, quote-unquote, shitting the bed with that whole ordeal a couple days ago?
Yeah, so what I think is going to happen here is Schiano staying at Ohio State. After what happened with Tennessee, I think you have to say he comes back into the protective, sweet embrace of Ohio State for another year. and people realized how just ridiculous the Tennessee thing was. I think this bought Ohio State another year. Schiano as the defensive coordinator. That's wonderful. So I think that's the best way to expect for Ohio State is that you get Schiano one more year.
Yeah, it did work out well for Ohio State. I know his agent, his people are out there. I'm sure they're still looking for a good gig, but who knows if there's going to be a good fit out there. I tend to feel the same way. I won't be surprised if he gets a head coaching gig after this year backs, but sometime this off season, maybe we'll hear something in the next month, even before Ohio State's season is up. But my gut feeling tells me Ohio State's going to get another year of Greg Schiano, and that's a blessing in disguise. I feel bad for him that those idiots down there lied and tied him to child rape and dragged his name through the mud. But it is, a blessing in disguise for Ohio State. There's no getting around that. If it works out that way, they get another year of Greg Schiano. Well, great stuff from the People's Champ as always. He is Matt Baxendell. You can follow him on Twitter at Matt Baxendell. You can catch his column every week on Bucknuts. It is the Bucket every Sunday. Thank you very much, Bax, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning in to the show. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great day. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.